You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
In a recent letter from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation to the U.S. Department of Justice is sparking outrage. The letter asked the DOJ to examine dealership franchise and warranty state laws. Joining us today to break down what this means legally and what could come next is Len Bellavia, who's the founding partner at dealerlaw.com. You've seen him here before on CBT News. In fact, you've seen him every place. He's the go-to for everyone in the media industry and the auto industry to turn to and say, what say you, Len, about this crazy letter that we're hearing so much about? So let's start there. The DOJ was asked to look, Len, and at dealership franchise and warranty state laws. I'll underline state. Can you break down what this means and what we should be looking for, and what are the hot button issues here?
Sure, Jim. First of all, thank you for inviting me back.
Sure.
This is a special discussion because I don't know if there's anything lately that has sparked such outrage in the industry.
Yeah.
And you go back a little bit and just examine, the legal background here. This is an outgrowth of President Trump signing an executive order that was designed to help small business entrepreneurs to get into business without regulatory obstacles. Mm-hmm. So here you have the furthest thing from startups.
Right.
These are not, Toyota is not an entrepreneurial business. It was designed to protect people. If you and I decided to open up a pizzeria, what regulatory obstacles do we face to prevent us from getting into business fast?
Right.
Well, Mercedes, Toyota, and General Motors do not fit that bill. So they have essentially crashed a party that they were not invited to by even writing this letter. The other interesting piece of this is I get a kick out of the fact that they call themselves the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. That sounds very intriguing, and it's like a group of scientists got together.
Yes, it does.
But for decades, this was called, the Association of Automotive Manufacturers. So let's make no mistake.
Okay, gotcha.
Not a benevolent third
the other
party.
one, the alliance sounds so much more friendly.
Well, that's just it. The idea is let's lend some credibility to this letter by not suggesting that we have a vested interest in causing great economic harm to franchise dealers, which is what this is all about. So to make matters even more intriguing, aside from not being invited really to even weigh in, is that this is the Department of Justice. This is not like it was years ago where they put in a opinion letter to the Federal Trade Commission, type of a workshop, where they would take the waters. This is pretty serious. Essentially, they've basically taken up arms against their dealership partners with the Department of Justice. I can't imagine anything more insulting to a dealer than to think that their manufacturer, without notice, through their group, has issued a letter to the Department of Justice seeking to basically eviscerate dealers of their franchise protections.
Yeah.
Without getting too much into the weeds, and I'll spend a few minutes on discussing why the position that they've taken is so absurd and rehashing of arguments that have been rejected summarily over and over again, but they just can't, I guess, resist the temptation of basically seizing upon this executive order as some type of an invitation to try and unscramble decades worth of laws that were designed to protect dealers against the oppressive conduct of manufacturers. And if you look at the legislative history of these franchise laws that the Alliance of Automotive Innovators are seeking to undo, they all came about because of oppressive conduct by manufacturers because they have unequal bargaining power against dealers. If auto manufacturers had their way, they would pay dealers nothing for warranty.
Right.
They would put dealerships at every corner. They would force inventory upon them.
Yep.
I mean, the list goes on and on. They'd make them build, $10 million buildings that have no return on investment possibilities.
That's right.
Anybody in the industry has read this book over and over again, but it seems as though the auto manufacturers just can't help themselves. And ironically, they've done themselves, in my opinion, great harm by showing their hand in a forum that they really have no seat at the table. So what did they really do except expose themselves and their weak arguments to dealers that at the very same time they're asking to belly up and do things that cost dealers a lot of money?
Yeah.
I really don't think they went to their legal counsel before they wrote this letter. I mean, it's an offensive letter. Every dealer should read it. Thank goodness NADA stepped up and wrote a very compelling powerful response,
Yeah.
line by line to all of the fallacious arguments that are being raised.
Sure.
But
Sure.
at root, essentially what manufacturers are saying here is there should not be RMA, relevant market area protections. And all that really is, and by the way, many industries have it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to pay for a franchise, or in this case, invest millions of dollars to get a franchise dealership up and running, you shouldn't have to worry about a dealer, the manufacturer opening another dealer 3 miles away.
That's right.
So is that unreasonable? I mean, any industry would appreciate that, and
Yeah.
most industries have this protection. But the Automotive Alliance for Innovation has decided that this is so offensive that they can't put a dealership at every corner. That's essentially, and the reason it's a fallacious argument is they don't want dealerships at every corner anyway. We saw that during bankruptcies where
That's right.
Chrysler,
When they were closing them.
they were closing 25% of their dealers because many, many years ago, back in the 40s and 50s,
Yeah.
General Motors and Ford and Chrysler decided that they did want dealers at every corner.
Yeah.
Eventually, they learned that that wasn't good for anybody, consumers, dealers, or the manufacturers.
That's right.
So they tried to weed them out, and they seized upon the bankruptcy. GM did the same thing to cultivate the herd, so to speak, and eliminate a great number of dealers. So now, why are they fighting this fight again? Are they saying that they want to put dealers at every corner again?
Yeah.
Or are they trying to weaken dealers because they have some ulterior motive? And some cynics may say, well, they are trying to economically browbeat dealers into submission so that they can introduce, get some negotiating leverage to introduce direct selling. So if you ask me, what I think the malevolent motive here.
So you think this is kind of the prelude to that?
Yeah. So they're kind of, they're negotiating in a sense, although I think it's going to hit a brick wall to try and weaken dealers to capitulate to allowing direct sales, which is another fallacy because I think we've all seen by now that direct sales do not do good for consumers. Right. Just ask any Tesla customer. We've passed the point of the honeymoon now, so I think Tesla customers are starting to admit it was not the best decision they've ever made.
That's right.
I know Scout, Volkswagen is raising their hand to seek the same relief, but the absurdity of the arguments don't change. The problem is that when you make these arguments to people that don't live in the automotive industry, they sound palatable. They sound reasonable. Well, if you have dealers forming this coalition that they have all these protections, isn't that protectionism? Isn't that a form of monopoly? No, a monopoly is when the manufacturer dictates the price and you can't buy a motor vehicle from anyone other than the manufacturer. Yeah. That's a monopoly. And that's the great irony here, is that the Department of Justice and the federal government is supposed to guard against anti-competitive monopolistic practices. And lo and behold, here's a letter being written by the dealers that essentially the long-term plan here is being a monopoly.
Right. So that's right.
You're going to the wrong party. The government is not a very sympathetic ear. Secondly, think about the history here. The federal government can interfere with state legislation under the supremacy clause of the Constitution, which essentially says if there's a conflict between a state law and a federal law, the federal law prevails. Well, the federal government has not legislated this tapestry of laws that we have in this country to regulate automotive franchise law. They've left it to the states. So over the past, I'd say 70 to 80 years, every single state in the country has legislated some form of protection for dealers. And they didn't do so arbitrarily. Not every state is Republican. Not every state is Democrat. The economics of every state differ. Right. The geography of every state differs. So there's no uniformity. It's not as though all 50 state legislators got together and said, let's engage in an antitrust conspiracy. Right. They decided to listen to what's best, and there was plenty of opposition from the same people that represent the automotive manufacturers to say, no, these proposed laws are not fair. But guess what? The legislators, again, Democratic legislatures, Republican, and every other party have weighed in and say, no, this is good for auto manufacturers, dealers, and consumers. So the notion that they would waste all of their political capital in writing a letter that they have to know is going nowhere, because the federal government, first of all, the mission behind this law is not to protect automotive manufacturers. It's for young startup entrepreneurs. So the idea that they chose this is ridiculous. Secondly, they're not going anywhere with this because the state legislature has done a great job in all 50 states of balancing the equities of the various constituents. So I think all that really happened here is they couldn't help themselves to write the same regurgitated, rehashed arguments that have been rejected over the past 20 to 30 years over and over again without thinking about how lawyers that represent auto dealers and ATAEs that represent auto dealers in every state and every territory within a state are going to seize upon this letter to the betterment of franchise dealers. Because how now can a manufacturer go to a dealer, now that they've written a letter to the Department of Justice and said, we don't want dealers to have territorial protections, we don't want dealers to collect retail reimbursement at fair and reasonable rates. So essentially what they're saying is we want to put them all out of business.
Yeah.
Because if they can't collect retail at the same rates and charges that they charge customers, then what's left? Economic ruin. So is that what the end game here? They want to put dealers into a position where they have to capitulate to direct sales models. So I think that it was poorly thought out. Dealers, attorneys are high-fiving each other. ATAE should be high-fiving because the next dealer that receives a letter mandating a renovation or participation in something that resembles two-tiered pricing or taking allocated inventory that they really don't want, or all the things that happen on a daily basis, buying equipment. Now dealers have every justification to waive this letter and say, wait a second, I'm not going to see a return on investment because if you have your way and someone at the Department of Justice actually believes this nonsense, well, you're going to basically put my dealership out of business. So why would I spend $7 million on a new facility?
That's right. That's right.
Or even $500,000 on special tools and equipment or chargers or anything that manufacturers ask for. So I think that somebody fell asleep at the switch, didn't think this through, didn't go to their legal counsel and decide, how can this come back and bite us? That's why I say, I think privately, I think once ATAEs and dealership attorneys get over their ire over how absurd this communication was, I think they're going to realize that the manufacturers are basically going to make our lives easier in pushing back against some of the initiatives that manufacturers come out with every year.
Sure. And the notion that this letter of this magnitude was sent to the DOJ without the approval of either the board of directors of the Alliance Group or even all of the OEM members is crazy, right? I mean, either staffer or some attorney within the organization, I don't know who signed the letter, but whoever signed the letter, you would think they would have gotten prior approval to say, hey, let me send the letter to you.
They certainly should have. If they're still working with the Alliance, I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
I would think that every general counsel for every OEM should disavow any participation or approval of this letter if they're smart. They have to distance themselves from it. Look, if they felt it was going to gain traction and the federal government, look, the DOJ theoretically has the legal right to buy into this, and they can't just eradicate the state laws. They'd have to go to court and argue that the statutes violate the U.S. Constitution or that the federal antitrust laws preempt these state protections because they are unfair, they're anti-competitive. But how do they win that argument? How does anyone with a straight face say that it's anti-competitive if I want to buy a Chevrolet, that I'm somehow penalized by getting prices from 5 competing dealers? That I'm going to
doesn't seem too much like a monopoly to me.
Well, exactly. So if General Motors wanted to do direct selling, how do they credibly argue that the dealer infrastructure is anti-competitive? It's just absurd. And when you read the NADA letter, even if you didn't have any understanding of the automotive franchise network, if you're just somebody at the DOJ, you say, wow, this is a disingenuous letter that the Alliance wrote. I mean, NADA makes perfect sense of refuting these, and they cite to many, many credible studies that contain empirical data to say that consumers historically do much better financially under the franchise system, and that consumers are happier. Of course, we all hear the stuff about people being unhappy. We know that, and in some cases it's true. But by and large, the studies of the past 5 years show that over 90% of consumers are happy with the experience of buying or leasing a new car.
Right.
So all of these arguments that were raised in this letter really hold no water, and I'm just totally miffed at the idea that they think, the manufacturers thought this was the opportunity to wage war with their dealer partners.
That's right.
This was not the opportunity, and I don't know what they expected to gain from it, except to get dealers to comfortably now fight back against any initiative. And if I were an OEM, I'm sorry, an ATAE right now, I would follow suit with the state. There's 4 states now that have gone the extra mile and not only fought for retail parts markups and retail labor rates, but now are fighting for retail labor time, meaning the time allotment, using third-party guides to make sure dealers are getting paid fair and reasonable, not just the labor rate, labor time. So I think now what this is essentially an invitation for 46 other states to raise their hand and say, all right, you want to put us out to business? Guess what? Not only are you not putting us out of business, but we want retail time, just like the 4 states that are already passing legislation.
That's right.
They'll come back to fight them. That's my prediction.
Yeah, they took the gloves off only to find out that they're going to get hit in the face, in the long run. Or
that's why I think whoever signed this letter decided to be a hero and not run it up the flagpole.
Yeah.
The only thing that surprises me is the manufacturers haven't issued letters yet, basically distancing themselves from it. But I predict that will happen in short order, and I don't even think the DOJ will take this up.
Yeah, all it takes is that it just takes that first one, and then the others will all say, "Yeah, oh my gosh, we love our dealers, and this was sent in error, and maybe even there's a sacrificial lamb. Somebody's got to jump on the fall on the sword, as they say, and leave the organization." And they say, "Yeah, we got that person out. He never should have wrote it."
I'd have to change the name of the association again, for the 3rd time. Somewhere.
That's right. Rebrand it.
Yeah, rebranding is
right.
Just like they force dealers to rebrand, it's time for them to rebrand.
Len Bellavia, founding partner of the law firm of Bellavia Blatt, also known as dealerlaw.com. Thank you so much for stopping by CBT News and helping us figure all of this out. Automotive News did a great job in covering this. I know they had some quotes from you in there, which kind of prompted this whole thing. So thanks so much for being that soothing voice that dealers can turn to in times like this to say.
I think it also shows, what your station does and Automotive News does and all the ATAEs. So they can take a shot at the industry, but if they learn another lesson from this,
we're right here.
They're not going to take it sitting down.
That's right. That's right. All right. Thanks so much, Len. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Jim.
All right,
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.